Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the first of my update 1.46 car reviews. Let's start off with the poster child of this update, the Skoda VGT and Skoda's introduction to the world of Gran Turismo, and hopefully down the line we will see more of this Czech brand. Now, I do want to give a quick disclaimer before we get into this review. I will be leaving my personal bias about EV cars at the door, so I will be reviewing this car based on exactly what it's been like in my experience in terms of GT7 so far. So let's start off as always at the price point of this car. This is the typical VGT price point of 1,000,000 credits. Nothing changed there. In terms of the overall PP rating, it's 853.16. Displacement, none. Drivetrain, four-wheel drive, BHP is 1071. In terms of the weight, it's 1300 kilograms and it's EV, electric vehicle. So on paper, not too bad really, apart from the EV thing. And in terms of the stats, it is much better than I originally expected it to be. No way did I expect this thing to be putting out 1,000 brake horsepower. And one thing Polyphony did do right is the default tyre compound for this car is racing mediums and not the likes of a sports compound of tyre. So this is probably the first time in a while that I felt like Polyphony actually got the default compound for a car correct. They could have made this much worse by putting it on sports compounds out of the box, but it is on racing, which is a massive improvement, and considering the amount of power it does have, is pretty much necessary. So let's talk about Skoda's introduction to the world of Gran Turismo. So before we get into the car itself, let's talk about Skoda themselves. They are basically doing a big push at the minute to make themselves more prominent in the world of motorsport racing games, and this is their introduction to Gran Turismo by making their own concept car slash vision Gran Turismo car. I know a lot of people don't like that, and I'm exactly the same. I'm not the biggest fan of VGTs for reasons I will explain. Obviously the lack of customization, the lack of tuning options, and I'm not really a fan of EVs either. I'm a bit old school in that way, but again, I'm leaving my biases at the door. This is still a new manufacturer getting on board Gran Turismo, and the more the merrier. This is basically just their introduction to the series. I am pretty sure we will see plenty of them down the line. Now obviously in terms of the car itself, it does take styling cues from an absolute classic Skoda race car, and in that sense we will probably end up seeing the original a little bit later down the line as well. So in that way, I am completely happy with this car in the fact that it brings a new manufacturer on board, it gets them the chance to make their own vision car slash concept, and we will probably see a more prominent use of the Skoda brand further down the line. So the car itself, is it better than it had any right to be? Absolutely. I am more than happy in saying that this car did exceed my expectations. They were absolutely on the floor for this car. Originally, I just couldn't get myself excited for it. I knew exactly what this car was when it was coming. There's been articles out about it for around about a year and a half, and I didn't like the way that Polyphony were hyping up this whole, 3-day countdown sort of thing around the Skoda VGT. I can understand it from the point of Skoda. It is their introduction to Gran Turismo, and good on them for making a big deal and being proud of their work. But in terms of Polyphony hyping it up, again, it's difficult to get on board a car where there's been stuff out for it for the longest time, and originally they were saying it was never meant for Gran Turismo. Now obviously we now know it was, and it is actually here in the flesh. In terms of the car itself and performance wise, like I mentioned, it does feel like the first time in a while when it comes to VGTs that Polyphony's absolutely nailed the tire compound on this one. Typically they will put it on sports and it'll be absolutely god awful. Thankfully this one comes on a racing compound and it feels very much necessary. This is a very quick car, there is no doubt in that. In terms of a performance aspect, this car exceeded my expectations as well. It's very, very quick, and it's actually a very enjoyable car to drive once you get used to the fact that it does feel quite weighty, and with it being electric it does lack gears, which might seem unnatural to some, but if you're an automatic driver then this might not be too bad. In terms of its overall use though, unfortunately it is very limited, once again being an EV. Now it does recharge itself under braking actually very well, and if you do create races catered towards this car, just like I did with my update 1.46 lobby which was open to my subs the other day, then you can have some decent racing in it. In fact, in terms of its racing potential, it follows very well and it races very well. Again, it's just the aspect that when it comes to the single player of the game, it does not cater towards the EVs or even some of the road cars at all. In fact, it's absolutely shambolic considering you can only get 2 laps out of this car, which is a massive shame for it. And to be totally honest, with the amount of performance, if this did have events catered to it which were longer in length, you could probably get some very decent use out of it. Unfortunately, currently its use is very limited just due to the fact that Polyphony doesn't cater to different types of vehicles for events. Let's say you want to run this at 800 pp, whilst that is typically great for a lot of race cars, unfortunately when it comes to a lot of the road cars and electric vehicles, they're pretty much useless or you'll be pitting all the time. So unfortunately, again, until Polyphony decide that, do you know what, we're going to have to alter the settings depending on the type of car, whether that be race car, road car, EV, etc. It's very limited in its overall use. It does currently have a time trial on the go, and I've been actually having a ton of fun on it. Now, I've got around about 400 to 500 miles clocked on the Skoda VGT at this point, whether that was racing online in my sort of custom lobbies, the single player events in the VGT trophy, or the time trial. And overall, from a performance standpoint, and even in terms of the look of the thing, it is better than I expected. In fact, it's pretty cool watching the aero flaps kind of get up and down under braking and, you know, sort of move themselves around. Just in terms of the aesthetic of it, I do think it looks better than the original teasers, and you can see some of the influence of that classic race car in the game. Again, the downsides overall are going to be the fact that it's EV, the fact that it is very limited in its use until Polyphony learned to cater for all types of cars in game, and obviously the fact that it's a VGT with limited customization, obviously attached the EV to it, and probably the majority of the fan base will hate it before they even try it. However, in my opinion, did it exceed my expectations? Absolutely. Is it better than it had any right to be, especially when it comes to racing in custom lobbies? Absolutely. I found myself having fun with this when you get the settings right for this car. In terms of the overall potential of it, very limited at present. However, in terms of the overall thing that this car stands for, which is the entrance of Skoda to the world of Gran Turismo, welcome to the Czech brand. Hopefully we do see more of you, and hopefully this is just your introduction, and that license Gran Turismo and Polyphony now have for you guys doesn't get wasted. So the Skoda VGT, better than expected, unfortunately just very limited in its use. Now let's have a look where it ranks on our lap time leaderboard. So in terms of my predictions for the lap time leaderboard, I expected it not to make it on the overall, however it does. It comes in the final position currently of 20th place. As you can see, PP of 853.16, racing mediums just like the Group 1s, and does manage to do a lap of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, even with a couple of mistakes from myself, in a time of 6 minute 10.619. Rather quite respectable, to be totally honest. Overall, that is much better than I expected. So the Skoda VGT, for what it stands for as an entrance to a new manufacturer to the game, I am more than happy with it. Unfortunately, my personal bias make me want to just hate this car outright for being an EV, but if I leave those biases at the door, this car is better than expected. Unfortunately, until Polyphony pull their finger out and start catering to a wider range of these vehicles they're putting in game, then to be honest, I probably won't be using it in the long term. However, overall, as a splash in the pan sort of thing, it is better than I expected. Anyway, welcome to Gran Turismo Skoda. Again, like I mentioned, hopefully Polyphony do not butcher this license and we see more of the Czech brand a little bit later down the line. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care, guys. Peace.